Hey guys, it's Woody the Unexceptional Gamer, and this is one of those videos that's not so much about the gameplay. Instead, I'm going to tell some stories that come from my father-in-law. So my father-in-law is a funny guy. I think he's 74 years old now, and he's been married to my mother-in-law for almost 50 years. I don't know if they had their 50-year anniversary yet, but it's right in that range now. So anyway, he tells the story of how they met, and this is a true story. There's a fake one coming up too, but the story is they met at a party, and she was, getting on in years for the time. I think she might have been 25 years old, and she still wasn't married. And, he was talking her up. Anyway, what he told her was that she was beautiful, and that, he especially valued her beauty because he hadn't seen many women lately. And I think the truth was he hadn't seen many women lately because he had just finished fighting in the Korean War. But the lie was, and the lie that he told her, was that he hadn't seen any women lately because he was fresh out of prison. And she asked him what he did, and he said that he didn't really like to talk about it. I don't know if that was just part of the scheme, or if it was because he didn't have anything to think of, or didn't know which crime that he pretended he committed. But he told her that he had just been in prison, and that, he really valued her. So she kept talking to him, and it went on, and he seemed like a normal guy and not so much like an ex-con. And to him, the story just faded away. But to her, it was always in the back of her mind. She had this notion that, this guy's been in prison. I'm not sure if it's good or bad. And then they went on a trip. And she asked him, like, hey, are you allowed to cross state lines? And he's like, what? Of course I could cross straight lines. And she's like, well, you were in jail, you're still on parole. Are you allowed to cross state lines? And that's when he let her in on it, that whole thing was completely made up, that she had never been in prison at all, and that it was just a fib that he told her. And now it's kind of funny years later. And then that's how they actually met, and she overlooked it and married him anyway. But then years and years go by, and people ask, how did you guys meet? And rather than tell that story, what he tells her is that he used to be a taxi driver in New York City. Or what he tells anybody is that he used to be a taxi driver in New York City. And that she was at a bar, and she started drinking too much. And they needed to call a cab to take her home. So the story that he tells is that, he picked her up in the cab, and that she was loose. And he followed her back into her apartment, and that it was a love at first shag, I guess you could say. So, yeah, that's my father-in-law, and he still comes up with this stuff all the time. Like he recently had I think a prostate exam, and yuck it up, kids. If you're lucky, someday you'll be 74 too. So go easy on the man. But he had a prostate exam, and he had a black eye. And the nurse is like, what's wrong? And he's like, I don't really want to talk about it. And she's like, no, how'd you get the black eye? Tell the story. And he eventually sheepishly admits that his wife beat him. And it's not at all true. So just so you know, this is a man who had, I think, like 18-inch biceps, owned a weightlifting club for a long time. He was a fireman. He's not the sort who gets beaten by his wife, I think. But yeah, that's my father-in-law. He cracks me up, and he tells stories all the time. So pretty colorful guy. So on that note, a lot of guys, like in my little circle, like my coworkers and friends and stuff like that, they they think that my wife is pretty cool, and partly because she lets me get away with stuff. I get to go on like vacations, and I have a pretty complete workshop. I actually just bought a new tool chest. The thing is like 65 inches wide and 40 inches tall, and it keeps all my mechanics tools in it, and I have a fully working wood shop. You guys have seen my man cave video, probably seen some setups of my shop, and you get some painkiller already, then you hear Kyle bust on me and my expensive table saw, and people are like, how do you manage that? And what I tell them is that I'm gifted in the pants, and that when you've got that going on, that you can get away with more. But that's not the truth. Well, yeah, that is the truth. But the real story is that my father-in-law kind of broke in all the girls right. My father-in-law has 4 garages filled with tools and workshops and projects, unfinished projects in his case, that he works on. And I think that, when my wife sees the sort of things that I have, and the, sort of, guy needs, I had a motorcycle for a long time. I actually had 3 different motorcycles, and I had a Honda Interceptor, a Honda Nighthawk, and a Ducati. 907 IE, and people are like, how do you get away with this? And I think it's, look, her father had a Harley Davidson. I just kind of, I got one that was broken and right. So there's a little tip. Look at your potential father-in-law, and look at this guy and discover, is he a beaten man? Is he a little bit dominated by the wife? If so, you might have a woman on your hands with the potential to be dominating. If he seems like a pretty happy guy, I can't hit anything. If he seems like a pretty happy guy, then there's a good chance that your potential wife was raised right, and she's going to keep you as a happy husband. So I was so excited to get this kill streak. I called it in right on the spot. I didn't wait. I had this notion that the game was ending sooner than it was, and it turns out I had plenty of time, I think, for this chopper gunner to run its course. But anyway, that's my father-in-law. He cracks me up, and he cracks everybody up around him. Another thing he does to pick on my mother-in-law, whenever he eats pistachios, the ones that are like really hard to open, or maybe the shell's not split on the pistachio whatsoever, he saves those up and he keeps them in the bag. And after a couple rounds of them, he'll have like an entire bag full of those impossible to open pistachios, and then he gives those to my mother-in-law. And she has frustrating pistachios, and she has arthritis in her fingers. This might be a little bit mean, but yeah, that's what he does. So pretty funny stuff. The other thing I wanted to call out is Sam 5000 is doing a new video series, and what he does is he asks other YouTube commentators these questions, like, would you do this for $1 million? And typically it's some big sacrifice. And on the first episode, he had FPS Russia, Chris Trout, Only Use Me Blade, and me. And he quizzes us and asks us some questions. I'm at the very end, so I promise you I am in there somewhere, but yeah. Anyway, there'll be a link in the description to that video if you want to check it out. I thought it was pretty funny, and yeah, all the YouTube commentators, they can be more or less entertaining guys. So yeah, check that video out. I think that you'll like it because there's some good stuff in there. So one last, I've got a little more time to fill in, so I think I'm going to talk about haters. And on one hand, I understand that a natural consequence of having a pretty successful YouTube channel is that you're going to gather haters. I think anyone who's actually doing something, whether that be in politics or showbiz or to a much lesser extent YouTube, is going to collect his share of people who don't see things the same way he does. And that's okay. I kind of get that. But I will say that if you're trying to make a YouTube channel for yourself by, throwing stones at other people, that's not the way to go about doing it. People are looking for videos that entertain them, and you're not bringing that if all you're bringing is, hate towards other guys. If you look at the most successful channels on YouTube, I don't think that you'll find a lot of the top guys who've made a name for themselves by hating on others. If you look at, I think the big three are Hutch, C. Nanners, and Tabe. These guys don't cast any hate towards other directors. Even if you go down the line, other really big guys, Sandy Ravage, Only Use Me Blade, Moody Swede, if I'm trying to think of other guys that are bigger. There's Fuzzamuzza. These guys, you don't see them out there hating other channels. Instead, you just see them out there putting out the best content that they can. And I think there's been a trend lately to, find flaws in some other commentator. Look how stupid that was. There's a flaw. I'll help you out. There's been a trend lately to find flaws in other commentators and then just talk about them and nag on them. And that's not the key to success. The biggest, what I'll call villain channels in YouTube, they're not that big, not that big compared to the channels that the good guys have. So, look at yourself and ask yourself, hey, am I a good guy or am I one of the villains? And if you're one of the villains, then you're going to find yourself pretty limited. So that's some advice to you guys. Have a nice day, and I hope that you enjoyed the video.